Hello, welcome to today's vlog. Today's subject is inspired by one of the major events that happened over the weekend, which was the Hamas attack on Israel. They managed to launch over 700 rockets at Israel within 2, perhaps 3 days, a very short time. This demonstrates two things. Number one, it shows an increasing military capability on the part of Hamas to attack Israel. I don't think they managed before to launch that many rockets within such a short time. I could be wrong, but that's my recollection. Number two, it shows a limitation to Israel's Iron Dome anti-missile system, because even though overall the system had a 86% success rate, a number of them still got through, which shows that by launching a large number of rockets, you can overwhelm the system beyond its capability to respond, which is an important lesson for a potential future attack from Lebanon, because Hezbollah has more than 150,000 missiles. That's why, well, we're not going to talk about Lebanon today. We're going to stick with Gaza and Hamas. And in fact, we're going to go beyond that. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. I just wanted to mention that this time in this attack, Hamas killed 4 Israelis. And well, actually, sorry liberals if this offends you, but 2 of the victims were pregnant women. So I count that as 6 killed. But that's another argument for another day. What I want to get at today is an important lesson that Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, needs to learn, that he can learn from our own president during World War II, Franklin Roosevelt, FDR, and from one of his best generals, Douglas MacArthur. But before we even talk about them, we have to talk about a man who should be remembered more by history than he is. His name is Wilhelm Canaris. He was, during World War II, a German military officer, an admiral. He was the head of the German Abwehr, which was military intelligence during World War II. Why we need to remember him? Well, number one is because I just said he was the head of German military intelligence, but as you're about to see, he was one of the heroes of World War II. Why do I say that about a Nazi admiral, head of the military intelligence for Nazi Germany? Because he opposed Hitler. He had initially supported Adolf Hitler in the 1930s, but by 1939 he had become a staunch opponent of Adolf Hitler because of what he did to Jews and because of starting World War II. He saved a number of Jews from being sent to concentration camps. The sad irony of his life and his eventual death is he ended up in a concentration camp himself when he was judged to be complicit in the attempted assassination of Adolf Hitler. Why he matters to today's subject is because, well, I'll read you a quote. This is from the wiki entry on him. In 1943, while in occupied France, Canaris is said to have made contact with British agents. Canaris wanted to know the terms for peace if Germany got rid of Hitler. Churchill's reply, sent to him 2 weeks later, was simple: unconditional surrender. Now, why that matters is because that quote makes it seem as if Churchill was the decision maker. It seems to imply that Canaris made this proposal to Churchill. Churchill made a decision and relayed his decision through Canaris's contact to Canaris. But that's only part of the story. The whole story is that Churchill discussed it with FDR. It was FDR's decision to demand unconditional surrender. Churchill wanted to have the discussion with Canaris. He wanted to talk about terms of surrender, and so did Dwight Eisenhower. They both wanted to end the war early if they could, because it would save Well, you can go back in history and see how many people died in the last year, year and a half of World War II, who perhaps would not have died had FDR decided differently. But FDR demanded unconditional surrender. The point I want to make is that even though so many more people died, FDR was right. He was absolutely right that there was no alternative to demanding unconditional surrender, because Germany had to know that it would be disarmed. It had to know that it was, in short, beaten, and not just beaten, but humiliated. You wanted all the leaders of Nazi Germany, the ones that would not be tried as war criminals and executed, to be completely humiliated so that there would not be a World War III somewhere in the future. Also, it was necessary so that the Allies could rebuild Germany, because that is the surest way to prevent another war, which is, once you've disarmed your enemy, once they can no longer hurt you, is to rehabilitate them and to turn an enemy into a friend. This is what he realized. That is the basic lesson that was echoed by General MacArthur during the Korean War, when he said famously that there is no substitute for victory. One of the major blunders that we made, the United States, was to stop short of a complete victory in the Korean War. And you can see the results today with a nuclear North Korea, but you can see the results in all the decades intervening between the end of the Korean War, or we'll say the armistice, because technically we're still at war with North Korea. We never signed a peace agreement with them. MacArthur had wanted to drop an atomic bomb on North Korea. Now, the Hiroshima bomb had killed 325,000 people in the wink of an eye. Now, let's just assume 325,000 dead. Truman balked at that. He did not want to kill 325,000 people. Just look at 1 year of famine in North Korea since then. Not the whole time since then, just 1 year, where millions have starved and are starving today. By being unwilling to kill 325,000 in 1952, Harry Truman condemned many times that amount to death since then. And not the kind of quick death that you would have had for most of those people in an atomic bomb explosion, but slow death by starvation or in a North Korean concentration camp. And by the way, there's something interesting about this figure, an interesting historical coincidence about this number, 325,000, because you go back to the Civil War. At the beginning of the Civil War, General Sherman told Abraham Lincoln that to win this war, we're going to have to kill 300,000. So we're not talking about a new concept. We're talking about a very old concept, but a concept that has been forgotten. FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, was, tell me where I'm wrong, but he was the last president to unequivocally pursue a victory and dictate the terms of peace. If you want to know the mistake of the Vietnam War, that was the mistake. If you want to know, well, just about every war we've been in, with the possible exception of George W. Bush in the Iraq War. But even then, we fell short. We defeated the Iraqi army, but we did not dictate the terms of the surrender. By dictate, what I mean is writing their constitution for them, as we did for Germany and Japan, one or the other or both. I don't remember, bear with me if I don't look it up, it's not really germane to the discussion today. But we managed much more closely the aftermath of the war. Afghanistan is a perfect example too, that we did not put in. We defeated the Taliban temporarily, but they've been coming back again and again ever since. Which brings us now to Hamas and Netanyahu, and how these lessons that I've been talking about apply vis-a-vis Hamas. As I'm recording this, the last I read was that there is now a ceasefire. For the umpteenth time, I've lost count, Hamas has attacked Israel, and Israel's response has been a lot of airstrikes, but it's been basically airstrikes and then agreeing to a ceasefire, which only sets him up for another attack by Hamas sometimes in the future. I was talking about their increasing military capabilities, so now he's giving them a chance to learn from their mistakes and come back again in the future with even greater capabilities. Or maybe not, because I also read a quote from Netanyahu saying that this is not the end of the story. So I'm hoping then that this is just a temporary abatement while Israel hosts the Eurovision contest, which they're hosting this year. I'm hoping that once the contest is over, that Netanyahu is finally, as he's being urged to do, both by opponents and supporters alike, to finally deal decisively with Hamas. Time will tell. But what does victory mean? It doesn't mean simply attacking with greater force. It doesn't mean doing greater damage. It doesn't mean killing more people. It means what it meant during World War II, which is having the enemy come to you and sign a formal instrument of surrender. Because even now, the leadership of Hamas, with all the damage that they have suffered, they're actually claiming a victory because they are expecting money to keep them afloat a little bit longer. This is what remains to be seen, whether Netanyahu is going for, as I said, the umpteenth time, keep enabling Hamas because they do not want to go in and do the job necessary to defeat them totally. They, number one, well, they're humane. They don't want to kill a lot of civilians. That's understood. They don't want to sacrifice a lot of Israeli soldiers either, but they're just delaying the inevitable. What Netanyahu must do is what FDR did, demand that Hamas surrender unconditionally. And what that means is, it means the leadership of Hamas sign a formal written document of unconditional surrender. If they do that, then it's going to be I wouldn't put it past them, but it's going to be very hard for them to sign their names to a document saying they surrender unconditionally and then later claim that they won a victory. If they do, they'll be completely humiliated. And also, just as important to the Palestinians living under Hamas is that an unconditional surrender will facilitate the ability of the Israelis and actually the rest of the world to go in and rehabilitate Gaza without having the funds and the materials that are intended to rehabilitate Gaza be diverted into military uses, to be used to build sewers instead of terrorist tunnels, to build hospitals instead of bunkers. All that comes from unconditional surrender. So what the Israelis need to do is win. And one of the good things that they are doing is they're resuming the doctrine of targeted assassinations. And that's one possibility that could make it easier for the Israelis to force an unconditional surrender. Instead of invading with thousands of troops, tell the leadership of Hamas, either Sinwar or Hania, probably Hania, that he must sign an unconditional surrender or the Israelis will kill him. That's simple. They can do it. It may take time, but they can do it if they want to. If they have to send in troops, that's fine, but just send them in to do that one thing, track down Hania. If he refuses to surrender, kill him, and then move on to perhaps Sinwar, tell him the same thing, surrender or we'll kill you, and then just work your way down the food chain, down the echelon, until you find somebody, and you will. You'll eventually find somebody who will sign a formal document of surrender. Once somebody does, then you also solve the problem that the Israelis anticipate if they were to go in and conquer Gaza, which is how to run the place, because they don't want to rule Gaza. They don't want to have to deal with running the day-to-day affairs of Gaza. But if you have somebody sign an unconditional surrender, then it becomes very, very simple, because then that person becomes your puppet. And instead of you, Israel, having to rule, govern Gaza, your puppet does that. Your puppet runs Gaza under your supervision. Problem solved. Indeed, that's how Iran is governed. There seems to be a conventional wisdom that the Ayatollahs are dictators who run Iran. That actually is not the way their system works. That is not true. Their system is rather unique. They have a functioning government. They have a court system. They have a legislature. They have a president. But sitting on top of that is the Ayatollah and a council of experts. What they do is, well, they're really just watchdogs. They let the government govern as it wishes, but if they violate certain guidelines that the Ayatollahs have laid down, then they'll step in. For instance, instead of appointing a president, they have elections, but they decide who can run. And they don't pick those people who can run. The candidates themselves decide to run, or the people who support them put them up for election. The Ayatollahs sit up there, they just vet them, and they'll reject. They don't accept this one or that one. They reject the ones that are unacceptable. There's no reason why the Israelis cannot do the same thing. And in fact, now that I think of it, you can go beyond Iran, and I mean way beyond Iran, and I don't mean just in place, I mean in time, all the way back to, and here's an irony for you, all the way back to ancient Jewish history, when Herod ruled, at that time, the Roman province of Judea. When the Romans conquered it, they put Herod in charge. Herod was not a Jew. Herod was brought in by the Romans to rule over the Jews. So never mind FDR, never mind MacArthur, Prime Minister Netanyahu, just look at I'm a Jew, our own history, and you see what to do. Now all you need is the will to do it. That's it for today. I'm glad that you could join me. I hope you come back again. If you liked this video, thumbs up, share it with other people who you think might benefit from this subject. Subscribe. I guess that's it for now. Oh, and if you want me to talk about something, feel free to suggest it in the comments below. Finally, as always, your comments are welcome. I would love to hear what you think. You've heard what I think. I want to hear what you think. That's it for today. Bye.